It's been 2 years since the horrific October 7 terror attacks in Israel. I think we all remember where we were when we heard the news that Hamas terrorists launched the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. More than 1,200 men and women were killed, women were raped in one of the most evil acts imaginable. Joining us now is Joel Burnie, Executive Manager at the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. Joel, thank you so much for your time. Our hearts are certainly with everyone in Israel and all of our Jewish friends here in Australia and right around the world. Today I'm thinking about the family members of hostages who haven't seen their loved ones in 2 years, and of course reflecting on the time I spent in Israel. I've said this before, but I've never felt anything as dark as visiting the site of the Nova Music Festival just months after that terror attack, where that festival became a killing field on October 7 and innocent people were captured and taken hostage. Joel, can I get your reflections today?
Well, thank you as always, Gabriella, for having me on. It's a very tough day for Jews worldwide. It's a very tough day for Israelis. It's a very tough day for Australian Jews. The horrific events of 2 years ago, we all remember, as you say, where we were. I have spent a lot of time in Israel since and exposed lots of Australians to the horrors of what happened, and it's just unfortunate that I don't think that any Australians who remember where they were on this day 2 years ago would have thought that we would be at this stage where Australian Jews are at 2 years later. It's been a tortuous and abundantly difficult period for Australian Jews in the shadow of, as you say, the most horrific attack on Jews since the end of the Holocaust. The explosion of anti-Semitism, which has been associated with the massacre on October 7, 2023, has been felt by Australian Jews more than many other Jews around the world. And it's a continuing issue that so many Australian Jews are feeling unsafe in their own country. And the solemn part of this day is, unfortunately, we have to share the podium with very unsympathetic and mean elements of Australian society that think that now is the time to not only celebrate what Hamas has done, but to rub that in the face of the Australian Jewish community. So I've got mixed feelings, Gabriella, sadness, deep sadness and sorrow, but I'm equally saddened by the state of affairs in our country right now.
Yeah, you mentioned the explosion in anti-Semitic attacks. I mean, just in the last 24 hours, a billboard has been vandalised with anti-Semitic graffiti in Fitzroy. The phrase "Glory to Hamas" was spray painted above a busy intersection in Fitzroy. And you mentioned the protests that are being planned. I mean, pro-Palestine activists are still trying to push ahead with this protest set to be at the Opera House, to Hyde Park this weekend. And we all remember the ugly scenes during the pro-Palestine protests that took place just days after the October 7 terror attack. And we've seen so many demonstrations here in Sydney and in different parts of Australia where there has been so many anti-Semitic chants being chanted, anti-Semitic symbols being held up, and a lot of support for Hamas, Joel.
Well, anti-Semitism has been normalised in Australia over the past 2 years, Gabriella. So these protest movements, we've been seeing a protest on a weekly basis in Melbourne, for instance. So Melbourne CBD has been a no-go zone for Jews for 2 years. The Premier is aware of it, the police are aware of it, but they seemingly don't have any tools in their toolkit to make it more free for Jews to be able to go to downtown Melbourne on a Sunday. The idea that in Sydney a protest would be organised in and around the anniversary of the massacre at the Opera House itself is purposefully designed to rub it in the face of Jewish community in Australia, but to also highlight and illustrate that they believe that they have won. They believe that they own the streets. They believe that they can chant death to the IDF, Zionists are terrorists, from the river to the sea, these genocidal statements on the streets of Sydney, Melbourne and elsewhere with full freedom. And the Opera House, we all remember the events of October the 9th, just a mere 48 hours after the massacre itself. these protesters hijacked the whole agenda by their violent chants, which also, the Attorney General of New South Wales warned Jews 2 years ago not to go to downtown Sydney for their own safety. So where have we come? What have we learned from those 2 years, both at a state and federal level? We have allowed these protests to continue. I do note that in New South Wales they are challenging the protest location at the New South Wales Supreme Court. I believe it's being moved to the Court of Appeals for a hearing tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the idea that in this country that it is okay to celebrate the murder of 1,200 Jews at such iconic areas in Sydney, Melbourne or elsewhere in this great country, you would have thought that that unsavoury type of behaviour would have been called out and quashed 2 years ago, but still now we're still having to fight with these guys on the streets of Melbourne and Sydney and elsewhere. And we as a community and the Jewish community have had a gut feel, but I do suggest that the rest of Australia has had a gutful as well. Oh,
100%, Joel. Let's talk about the war in Gaza. It's interesting, all these pro-Palestine activists seem to be pretty quiet about Donald Trump's peace plan. If they really want to see the war in Gaza come to an end, you'd think there'd be a bit more support. But Trump has warned Hamas that it must immediately greenlight his plan to end the war in Gaza or all bets are off, as of course there is now this renewed hope that all 48 hostages could be coming home within days. Negotiators for Hamas, Israel and US officials are heading for talks in Egypt. Now, there are reports that Trump has also torn into Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in their latest discussion, telling the leader to stop being negative during a phone call. Now, this is, of course, very high stakes, Joel. What's your assessment of where this is at now?
So we have an abundance of cautious optimism in terms of the hopeful release of the hostages. So as you said, negotiating teams are in Egypt right now, where the details of the announced plan are hopefully going to be ironed out, where some type of agreement will be had, and hopefully those 48 hostages will be released in the coming week to week and a half. I would suggest that Hamas will try and delay that by utilising different tactics, suggesting that they can't find all the hostages or they've lost contact with those that were looking after them. But in terms of the immediate outcomes, the hope is that the hostages are going to be released and going to be released soon. In terms of the other elements of the plan, I think that we need to be a little bit more cautious into what Hamas is actually going to agree to. So Hamas's initial response to the plan clearly says that they want a continued role in the governance of Gaza. Now, that is a clear red line of President Trump. It's a red line of Benjamin Netanyahu for obvious reasons, but it's also a very clear red line to the Australian government as well, who has said hundreds of times that Hamas can have no role. So whether or not Hamas tries to pivot itself, to rebrand itself, but to still have some type of role in that governance, I think that they will try to they will try to manoeuvre for that. The other condition is demilitarization. The big question is, will Hamas agree to give up its arms and hand them over to another entity, or to give them to the stabilization force? I again would point to my cautious, I would say my pessimism on that. I'm unsure whether or not Hamas is going to agree to those terms, even with some of the language that they've used over the past week to week and a half. So there's a lot of detail to still be ironed out. The most immediate concern is the release of the hostages. But once they are released, we all have a collective responsibility, and mainly governments who are underwriting this peace deal, the West, behind President Trump, but along with the Arab countries and Turkey, that they remain steadfast in their condition that Hamas can have no role in the future governance of Gaza. If they roll on that, or they show weakness on that, Hamas will exploit it, and then what you'll have is Hamas 2.0, and then within a couple of months or years after the Israeli withdrawal, we'll be back to exactly where we were on October the 6th, 2023, with rockets coming in from Gaza into southern Israel, and Hamas still holding control and governance control of the enclave. So there's still a hell of a lot to be done, but my hope is that there will be good news in the coming days. The final point is that I think that you don't want to underestimate too much about the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu. I understand that it gets headlines that Trump is, yelling or insulting or telling Bibi that he's always negative. I would suggest that their relationship is still very, very strong. And there's no doubt that Netanyahu believes that Trump currently has his back and has Israel's back. So I think that you'll see good things coming out of that relationship. I'm not too worried about the relationship between the president and the prime minister.
Joel, I have to ask you about Greta Thunberg. Israel has, of course, deported Greta Thunberg and more than 100 other activists who were detained after trying to breach the naval blockade of Gaza in what was another publicity stunt. Now, Greta Thunberg has spoken out, playing the victim again after being detained. This is what she had to say.
People were not being treated well. I was not able to say goodbye to people, and I don't know what's happening. And there were many issues.
When you say they're not treated well, what do you mean?
Well,
could you elaborate for us?
Obviously, in a very dehumanizing way. But of course, I have to stress nothing compared to what Palestinians are going through.
Joel, she claims she wasn't treated well. It's certainly hard to hear that while there are innocent people still being held hostage by Hamas terrorists. Now, Donald Trump has blasted Greta Thunberg. Take a listen.
She's just a troublemaker, she's no longer into the environment, now she's into this. She's a troublemaker. She has an anger management problem. I think she should see a doctor. She needs anger. If you ever watch her, she's a young person. She's so angry. She's so crazy. Now you can have her. She's just a troublemaker.
I think Donald Trump is saying what we're all thinking. But Joel, what do you make of Greta's latest stunt?
Well, it's clearly a stunt. Let's put a few things into context. So firstly, the flotilla had no aid. So they were claiming that they were coming to deliver essential aid to the enclave. There were many offers by the Israeli government and by other European powers to offload that aid and safely deliver that aid to the Palestinian people. There was no aid. This was entirely a PR stunt created by a little narcissist, by Greta, who wants to make herself the centre of attention, whilst all the other good motivation and momentum generated by President Trump's plan is being forgotten by these activists who care little for the Palestinian people and care nearly entirely about the delegitimization, the demonization of Israel. She is an attention-seeking troublemaker, as the president says. She is a narcissist who makes everything about herself and has no care whatsoever for the people of Palestine. The issues that I have with her is the amount of media attention that she gets. She has zero impact on this conflict. She has zero positive impact on the lives of Palestinians that she cares very little for. All she cares about is her own PR machine and her own narcissistic tendencies. And you'll see that through the rehearsed responses to what actually happened when they were detained. So all of the activists have collectively taken an oath to get behind this PR machine to do everything it can to discredit Israel. This was never about the Palestinians. This was never about the delivering of aid. This was entirely about Greta Thunberg and her useful idiots in generating PR for themselves. So I'm entirely happy with the actions of the Israeli government in detaining this flotilla. The fact if they were to make it to Gaza would set a terrible precedent, which would greatly complicate the current military actions in Gaza, and I don't think that the Palestinians in Gaza would want them either. So, this is just another stunt, completely for PR reasons. And please, you didn't get to say goodbye to your other captives. Cry me a bloody river.
Joel Burnie, we have to leave it there. Executive Manager at the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabriella.